Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. Lysera stumbled, her long ears brushing the edge of the gleaming observation platform as sparks flickered from the unstable energy conduit she had been inspecting. The world beneath her swirled with the iridescent shimmer of Seraphi's floating city, towers glowing in hues of violet and gold, suspended above rivers of liquid crystal that reflected the twin suns in fragmented rainbows. A sudden misstep, the conduit groaning in protest, and she felt an unnatural, searing pain shoot through her arm. She fell to her knees, gripping the limb, a hiss escaping her lips. The normally unflappable envoy was now a creature reduced to sheer panic, her pulse thrumming in her ears as drones hovered nearby, blinking silently and calculating what could be done to stabilize her. "Hold still, Lysera," one intoned in its monotone, its mechanical appendages readying to move, but she shook her head, twisting in pain. "I am not a specimen for your drills and clamps," she snapped, though the words barely masked a whimper. Her skin glimmered faintly under the lights, a subtle luminescence that betrayed the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She cursed her own recklessness and the frustration of being unable to control her own body. Before another protest could escape her, a voice rang out, human, chaotic, and irritatingly calm. "Step aside, tin can. I've got this." Dorian, a human engineer with a streak of insanity and an allergy to rules, strode forward, his hands bare, fingers flexing like a man ready to wrestle a gravity storm. Lysera's eyes narrowed. "You what?" She tried to push him away, but the pain made her movements clumsy. "You're a monster," she shrieked as Dorian knelt beside her, ignoring the hovering drone's alarms. "I mean, no offense, human, but monster is the only word for touching me without." She broke off as he grinned. "Without permission, protocol, and the entire galactic medical handbook, I know," he said, in a tone both apologetic and ridiculous. "Also, your arm looks like it's auditioning for a new kind of spaghetti. Let's straighten it out before it rebels further." And then he did. With a strength tempered by precision, he adjusted her bone with nothing but his hands. Lysera's sharp inhale merged with the hiss of energy from the conduit, and for a moment, the only sounds were the whirring drones and her own disbelief. The pain subsided almost instantly, leaving a tremor of shock in its wake. She stared at him, her long ears twitching, half in indignation, half in awe. "You dare touch me like that?" she demanded, but the words lacked bite. "Without any equipment, any protocol." "I dare," Dorian said with a smirk, waggling his fingers like a magician finishing a trick. "Also, I'm full of surprises. Consider this my calling card." Lysera blinked, the absurdity of his humor intruding into her panic. She found herself suppressing a laugh, her ears flicking. "Your idea of humor is uniquely human," she muttered. The drones hovered, unsure how to catalog this breach of procedure. Human improvisation versus alien protocol. As she gingerly tested her arm, Dorian leaned back on his heels, still grinning. "See, nothing broken except your opinion of me, and maybe your ego a little. Totally optional." Lysera's lips twitched, threatening a genuine smile, though she swatted at him, attempting to maintain dignity. "You are a monster. And yet here I am, saving monsters," he replied, with a wink that was both infuriating and strangely reassuring. The city beneath them sparkled, twin suns reflecting off the liquid crystal like tiny galaxies in motion. And for the first time since the accident, Lysera felt a cautious flicker of trust. Somewhere between awe and exasperation, she realized that surviving today might just have required a human, and that humans were unpredictably excellent at it. The tension lingered, but it was softened by the absurdity of Dorian's antics and the alien woman's begrudging amusement. Humor, courage, and sheer nerve had collided in a way that neither protocol nor proper equipment could have anticipated. And for Lysera, the day's disaster was beginning to feel less like a calamity, and more like the start of something unusual. Lysera hobbled slightly, testing her arm as the strange relief from the realignment settled like a tide washing away pain. Dorian matched her pace, hands tucked into his pockets, a casual grin plastered on his face, as if saving an alien envoy was just another Tuesday. "I promise I don't usually touch people without consent," he said, glancing sideways at her twitching ears. "Mostly." She shot him a glare sharp enough to cut through titanium, though a faint twitch at the corner of her lips betrayed her amusement. The city around them was alive, a kaleidoscope of colors and motion. Hovering vehicles hummed past on invisible tracks, carrying everything from exotic crystalline goods to erratic alien pets. Lysera's long ears flicked with every sound. The sensory input was overwhelming, but somehow Dorian navigated the chaos with the ease of someone who had spent too much time surviving his own accidents. He dodged a levitating cart full of glowing fruit, muttering, "Seriously, who parks these things in the air?" Lysera blinked, more at his audacity than his words. His reckless approach contrasted sharply with the rigid discipline of her own upbringing, yet she couldn't deny that his quick instincts were impressive. As they moved toward the Medbay for a follow-up check, Dorian kept up a steady stream of commentary. "You know, your people could use a few human improvisers. Maybe a few dozen," he said. "All this precision and hovering drones, sometimes you just need 2 hands and a dash of madness." Lysera tilted her head, the faint glow of her skin reflecting the sunlight. "Your confidence is infuriating," she said. "And yet effective." They rounded a corner, narrowly avoiding a group of small, 4-legged creatures racing on magnetic pads. One of them leapt directly toward Dorian, who caught it midair with one hand, holding it upside down while it squeaked indignantly. "See, multitasking. Humans are excellent at surprises." Lysera snorted, a sound like wind over crystal, and her eyes softened. For the first time since her accident, the tension in her body eased almost entirely. The Medbay itself was a sleek chamber of reflective surfaces, tubes of swirling healing gels, and softly humming apparatuses designed to scan, repair, and stabilize. The drones fell back as they entered, their calculated movements replaced by the unpredictability of human presence. Dorian leaned against a console, one eyebrow raised, and said, "So, do I get some kind of credit for hand-to-hand bone realignment, or is that just considered reckless heroism?" Lysera's lips twitched. "Reckless, audacious, and perhaps slightly irritating heroism," she replied, her voice losing its edge. While the automated medical units scanned her arm, she couldn't help but observe Dorian with new curiosity. There was something about the way he approached danger, the way he laughed in the face of protocol, that was unnerving and strangely magnetic. "You really are impossible," she said, her ears flicking in disbelief. "Why do humans insist on making everything so chaotic?" He shrugged, catching the eye of a hovering drone that emitted a polite but confused beep. "We call it charm," he said, smirking. "Or maybe it's genetic. Don't quote me on that." Lysera's restrained chuckle echoed softly in the Medbay, a sound that surprised her more than anyone. As the scans confirmed the bone's alignment was perfect and her mobility fully restored, the lingering dread of pain and vulnerability faded entirely. For the first time, she considered that this human, annoying, reckless, and impossibly bold, was not merely a savior by circumstance. Perhaps he was exactly the kind of unpredictable presence she hadn't realized she needed. Dorian stretched his arms with a theatrical yawn. "So that's it, all done. I was expecting some dramatic laser procedure or at least a holographic medal." Lysera rolled her eyes, hiding a smile behind her hand. "You are absurd," she said, "but effective." They left the Medbay together, a pair mismatched by species, culture, and temperament, yet somehow synchronized by circumstance, humor, and the invisible thread of trust that had begun to form. The city outside shimmered, alive with possibilities, and Lysera realized that the human at her side was already reshaping the rhythm of her day, and perhaps her expectations for what companionship across the stars might look like. Lysera adjusted the sleeve of her tunic, wincing slightly as her arms stretched with the movement, though the pain had largely ebbed. Dorian walked beside her, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, grinning as if the entire day had been a delightful rehearsal rather than an accident-riddled disaster. "So, Ambassador of Chaos," he said, nodding toward her long, delicate ears which twitched subtly at every sound. "Do these things double as emotion sensors, or are they strictly for decoration?" "I assure you they are highly functional," she replied, trying to maintain the dignity of a diplomat while also suppressing a smirk. "They allow me to detect subtleties in sound waves imperceptible to most species, and sometimes to detect idiocy in humans." Her ears flicked involuntarily as Dorian's grin widened. "Ah, then I'm basically a walking alarm system," he said, mock horror in his voice. "Good to know." They continued down a bustling street, the surface of the floating city vibrating faintly beneath them, powered by anti-grav generators that hummed in a low, reassuring drone. Vendors called out, selling levitating fruits and crystalline trinkets, while children with glimmering hair chased tiny, hovering creatures that darted like sparks of light. Dorian ducked a wayward pet and muttered, "These kids are training for some kind of interstellar gymnastics league, I swear." Lysera couldn't help a small laugh. She was still processing the strangeness of his presence. A human who moved with such careless confidence among dangers that would make even seasoned Seraphians flinch. There was a rhythm to his chaos, a kind of instinctive mastery that both infuriated and fascinated her. "Tell me, human," she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Do you always ignore protocols when people's lives are at stake?" "Mostly," he replied with a shrug, "but it keeps life interesting. And saves bones, apparently." He jabbed a thumb toward her arm, which was flexing smoothly now. "See, bone perfectly aligned, thanks me later." Lysera rolled her eyes, though she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun glinting off the liquid crystal below. "You have no idea how unusual this is," she said. "Most humans would hesitate, consult 100 manuals, or," she broke off, ears twitching at the sight of a hovering drone that wobbled uncertainly, "or die of indecision." "I'm nothing if not decisive," he replied, snatching a piece of floating fruit out of midair with the reflexes of someone who had once wrestled gravity storms for fun. He popped it into his mouth with a satisfied nod. "Also, I have snacks, which is a decisive factor in survival." Lysera shook her head, exasperated, though a faint smile played on her lips. They continued along the crystalline avenues, and she began to notice small details about him. How his gaze scanned the environment constantly. How his laughter seemed to diffuse tension effortlessly. How even his clumsy gestures had a strange, almost precise timing. It was infuriating and yet compelling. Their path brought them to a public plaza dominated by a hovering fountain that scattered liquid light into the sky. Children raced around it, alien vendors sold glowing fruits, and Seraphians in flowing tunics moved with their usual grace. Dorian nudged her gently. "Race you to that fountain. Loser buys the next snack." "I am a diplomat," she said, tusking at him. "And diplomats do not engage in—" Her protest was cut short as Dorian surged forward with ridiculous speed, laughter spilling from him. Lysera groaned but couldn't suppress a laugh as she dashed after him, her long ears trailing behind her like banners. By the time they reached the fountain, Lysera was breathing hard, her arms steady, her mind swirling not just from exertion but from the unexpected camaraderie forming between them. Dorian's grin was infuriating, charming, and utterly human. "See," he panted, teamwork, exercise, and diplomacy all rolled into one race. Lysera pinched the bridge of her nose, ears flicking in disbelief. "You are utterly impossible," she muttered, though her laughter betrayed her frustration. And for the first time, she realized that perhaps humans, with all their chaotic audacity, might have more to teach her than she had expected. The city shimmered around them, alive with possibilities, and Lysera felt the first genuine flicker of trust for the human who had dared to touch her, save her, and somehow make the entire world feel a little less terrifying and a little more livable. Lysera's steps were cautious, even as her arm remained steady, the subtle ache from earlier now a distant memory. Dorian, beside her, hummed a tune she didn't recognize, something distinctly human, slightly off-key, and entirely inappropriate given the hovering gravcarts weaving between them. "Honestly," she muttered, ears flicking irritably, "how do you remain so oblivious to danger?" "Talent," he said with a grin, ducking just in time to avoid a cart full of glowing fruits. "Pure, unadulterated talent. And also reflexes honed by too many poor decisions." One fruit fell from the cart, spinning lazily in the anti-gravity field. Dorian caught it with a flourish, tossing it into his mouth. "See. Snack secured, disaster avoided. Humans are practical that way." Lysera glared at him, but the faint twitch of her lips betrayed the amusement she didn't want to acknowledge. She realized, again, how completely different he was from anyone she had ever known. Seraphians approached challenges with measured grace, every motion pre-planned and precise. Dorian approached them with chaos, but somehow, the chaos worked. She tilted her head, long ears catching the hum of energy grids beneath the plaza. There was an odd poetry in the way he moved, reckless, yes, but almost perfectly synchronized with the unpredictable city. Their destination was a market where Dorian claimed he could find mechanical doodads that may or may not explode. Lysera followed him reluctantly, her steps light but deliberate. The vendors, creatures of varying shapes and sizes, regarded Dorian with a mixture of suspicion and bemusement. He bowed theatrically. "Greetings, interstellar purveyors of potentially combustible merchandise. I seek something that hums, buzzes, and possibly threatens to go boom, preferably in a fun way." One vendor, a squat, four-limbed creature with eyes that rotated independently, raised an appendage in polite confusion. Lysera's ears twitched. "He is completely impossible," she murmured. "And you, human, will never be able to exist quietly anywhere in the galaxy." Dorian winked. "Quiet is overrated, chaos is underrated, and besides, you look like you need a laugh." He gestured at her with mock solemnity. "Consider this your mandatory daily dose of human absurdity." Lysera couldn't help but laugh softly, the sound drifting into the air like wind over crystal. Her amusement was short-lived as one of the floating market platforms shifted suddenly, sending a small crate spinning toward them. Without hesitation, Dorian grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the path and spun the crate back with an exaggerated flourish. "See," he said, "instant heroics. Just call me the crate whisperer." Lysera's ears twitched, partly in exasperation, partly in disbelief. "You really do have a talent for chaos," she said, her voice tinged with reluctant admiration. The rest of their walk through the market was a mix of minor disasters, loose grav drones, slippery anti-grav tiles, and one particularly stubborn robotic dog. But each was diffused by Dorian's antics, which, somehow, always ended with laughter. Lysera noticed that with each near miss, her initial fear of relying on him was replaced by trust. Not the blind trust she reserved for her own kind, but something wilder and more exhilarating. Finally, they reached a quieter avenue lined with luminescent flora that pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of the city itself. Dorian stopped, hands behind his head, breathing a little harder from dodging another runaway cart. "See, we survived the wild streets of Seraphis, barely, but we survived." Lysera's long ears flicked, twitching with a mixture of irritation and something softer, gratitude. "Barely is accurate," she admitted. She studied him, his grin still wide and ridiculous, and felt an unexpected warmth. There was humor in him, yes, but also courage. Instinct. A human who could navigate chaos, who could act when everyone else hesitated. And for the first time, she considered that perhaps her initial judgment, his audacity, his madness, had been incomplete. Perhaps there was a method to his madness, a rhythm she was only beginning to understand. For better or worse, Dorian had become indispensable. As they continued, side by side, Lysera felt the invisible thread of trust stretch taut between them, strengthened by laughter, chaos, and small moments of survival. Somehow, the universe felt less overwhelming with him at her side, and more possible. Lysera leaned against the soft, luminescent wall of the corridor, letting the hum of the anti-gravity panels beneath her feet settle her nerves. Her arm was fully recovered now, but the strange thrill of relying on Dorian lingered like a residual pulse. Dorian, ever oblivious to subtlety, leaned next to her, hands jammed into his pockets, watching a display of floating holographic advertisements flicker in and out of existence. "You know," he said, "for someone who calls humans monsters, you seem awfully calm next to me." "I am not calm," she corrected, though the edge in her voice was softened by the hint of a smile. "I am merely assessing the situation as any sensible envoy would." Her long ears twitched, catching the faintest vibrations of the corridor's energy grids, an instinctive measure of safety. Dorian tilted his head, grinning. "Assessment, right. I call it trying not to die while you watch." He nudged her shoulder lightly, just enough to make her jerk back. "Relax, Lysera. You survived the day. Congratulations." She pinched the bridge of her nose, exasperated, but couldn't suppress a small laugh. His absurd human humor had a way of piercing the formal, structured world she was used to. He had a talent for disarming her, not with diplomacy but with sheer chaotic charm. "You are insufferable," she said, though her eyes followed him as he scanned the corridor with casual curiosity, noting every flicker of energy, every shifting panel. "You love it," he replied, smirking. "Admit it, human chaos is good for the soul." Her ears twitched in irritation, or perhaps amusement. "I do not love chaos," she said, teeth slightly gritted. "I tolerate your particular brand of it, temporarily." They moved into a wider chamber, walls lined with suspended energy conduits pulsing in rhythmic patterns. Lysera's eyes followed the streams of light as they danced like liquid crystal snakes. Dorian, not content to stand idly, reached out and poked one of the conduits. It buzzed faintly, a warning tone flaring, and Dorian grinned at the unexpected response. "See, even the walls want to say hello. We're making friends everywhere." Lysera shook her head, ears flicking. "Friends is not the term I would use." Her attention, however, was caught by the subtle pattern of vibrations running through the floor panels. Dorian noticed her focus and tilted his head. "Something wrong." "Not wrong," she said, measuring her words. "Interesting. The energy grids are not entirely stable. A minor surge could," she broke off, ears twitching as the floor beneath them quivered. "Oh, for the love of—" Dorian, ever ready, caught her elbow and steadied her, grinning like a man who had predicted the chaos all along. "Nothing to worry about," he said. "Well, maybe a little, but we'll survive probably, statistically maybe." Her irritation mixed with admiration. He was reckless, yes, and infuriating, but instinctively aware of danger in ways that defied logic. She realized that his audacity was not mindless. It was a form of understanding the world that she, with all her training, had never embraced. As they navigated the chamber, Dorian gestured dramatically toward a panel that had begun to spark. "And here we have the world's tiniest, least threatening, and most inconvenient electrical problem. Observe, human intervention in action." He pulled a tool from his jacket and with exaggerated flourish tapped the panel. Sparks fizzled out, leaving them unharmed. Lysera's ears twitched, and for the first time she let herself laugh outright. "You make even danger absurdly entertaining," she said. Dorian bowed slightly. "It's a gift, chaos with style." He winked. Their laughter echoed softly in the chamber, a bridge forming between alien formality and human recklessness. In that moment, she felt a bond stronger than caution, stronger than fear. Perhaps she had underestimated humans, and Dorian in particular, for their ability to survive, and even thrive, amid the unpredictable pulse of the universe. As they left the chamber, side by side, Lysera realized something she had never admitted. The human beside her, impossible and infuriating though he was, had become indispensable. And the thought, unacknowledged as it was, warmed her more than the luminescent corridors of Seraphis ever could. Lysera's steps faltered as a sudden tremor ran through the corridor, subtle at first, then growing into a jolt that sent loose panels rattling underfoot. Her arm tensed instinctively, the memory of her earlier injury whispering caution. Dorian beside her let out an exaggerated whistle, hands raised as if surrendering to the quaking floor. "Ah, the universe says hello again," he quipped, "and it brought coffee mugs that want to dance. Perfect timing." Her ears twitched sharply, picking up the faint hum of an unstable energy conduit further down the passage. "Dorian, move aside," she warned, trying to steady herself. The flux in the conduit could trigger a surge. "Flux, surge, tiny zap of doom, got it," he said, sidestepping with a casual flip of his jacket. "You mean danger. Gotcha. We're good at danger, it's kind of our thing." Lysera suppressed a sigh, equal parts irritation and admiration. She could feel the energy climbing, a subtle vibration under the floor panels, but Dorian's presence, absurd, irreverent, and infuriatingly confident, made the tension easier to bear. The corridors of Seraphis seemed to pulse with life, alive not just with technology but with unpredictability, and somehow he moved through it like a man who had befriended chaos itself. As they approached the conduit, the vibrations intensified, and a flicker of unstable plasma arced lazily across the nearby walls. Lysera instinctively flinched, but Dorian grasped her arm gently, steadying her. "Easy there. I've got you," he said, his grin defiant against the threat of sparks. "Also, this is a perfect opportunity for teamwork. You know human style. You panic gracefully, I pretend to know exactly what I'm doing." "Human style," she muttered, ears flicking, "is remarkably audacious." He winked. "And effective, mostly." With a few precise movements, he guided her to a safe patch of floor and reached out to stabilize a misaligned conduit segment, fingers brushing close to the arcs of plasma. Sparks danced across his gloves and he grinned like a child touching lightning for the first time. "See, just a little shocking entertainment, totally under control." Lysera shook her head, a reluctant laugh escaping. His absurd confidence seemed to neutralize the danger, turning potential disaster into a curious spectacle. She watched him move, noting how instinct and improvisation blended seamlessly, how his awareness extended even into chaos. "You really do operate differently from anyone I've ever known," she said. "It is unnerving." "And you love it," Dorian countered, catching a loose floating panel midair with one hand and juggling it with mock seriousness. "Admit it. You're enjoying the human method of surviving mayhem." Her ears twitched, betraying a mix of irritation and begrudging amusement. "I am not enjoying it. I am tolerating it," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. By the time the corridor settled, the conduit stabilized under Dorian's improvisation, humming softly, its dangerous arcs contained. Lysera's arm brushed his as they stepped back, a subtle warmth passing between them. For the first time, the alien woman realized that fear had given way to trust. Not blind trust, but something more thrilling. A recognition that the human beside her could act when others hesitated, that he could navigate chaos with both skill and humor. "You saved more than just my arm today," she admitted softly, her ears flicking in what might have been an attempt at modesty. "You made me feel less vulnerable." Dorian's grin softened, rare and genuine. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said. "Though next time, maybe let me know you're prone to panicking at fluxes. Makes it more dramatic for me." Lysera allowed herself a small, genuine laugh, her long ears twitching in amusement. For all his absurdity, for all his recklessness, he had earned something she had long considered unattainable: her trust. In the glow of the corridor's pulsating lights, the bond between alien and human, danger and humor, began to solidify, a quiet promise threading between them that neither protocol nor species could dictate. Lysera stood at the edge of the floating observation deck, the twin suns of Seraphis reflecting off the liquid crystal rivers below in fractured, sparkling rainbows. Her long ears twitched gently as she watched Dorian fuss with a hovering cart of supplies, muttering under his breath about how the anti-grav field definitely had it out for him today. She had laughed earlier at his antics, and now, watching him toss a crate upward only for it to settle neatly back on its stand, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the suns above. "You're infuriating," she said, stepping beside him, arms crossed, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. "I prefer delightfully chaotic," Dorian replied, grinning. "Though I suppose infuriating works too, depends on perspective." He caught her glance and shrugged, as if shrugging could explain everything. Lysera tilted her head, ears flicking as she considered how far she had come since the accident that had begun it all. At first she had been terrified, helpless, exposed, and certain that no human would act with the courage or skill required to aid her. And yet here he was, a human who had ignored every protocol, faced every danger with reckless brilliance, and somehow made her feel not only safe but understood. "You know," she began cautiously, "I did not expect to feel gratitude beyond what is customary for protocol. And yet," her voice faltered slightly, a trace of emotion threading through her carefully measured words. "You have changed something in me. I am less guarded than I believed possible." Dorian's grin softened, a rare moment of seriousness flickering behind it. "I'll take that as a victory," he said. "Humans are good at small, incremental victories. Sometimes chaos, sometimes trust, occasionally saving lives, all equally valid." He gestured to the horizon. "And look at this place. All the chaos we survived and we're still standing. Mostly unscathed. That counts for something, right?" Lysera's lips twitched, the faintest smile forming. "Mostly," she admitted, a hint of amusement in her tone. "And perhaps your definition of survival includes unnecessary theatrics." "Absolutely," he said with mock pride. "Theatrics are essential for morale and fun." The corridor behind them shimmered as the city's lights pulsed in gentle waves, reflecting the rhythm of a living planet. Lysera's long ears flicked once, then again, picking up the subtle vibrations of energy stabilizing across the city's grid. She realized, with quiet astonishment, that she had grown through this journey. Where once she had relied on rigid structure, precision, and protocol, she now understood the value of improvisation, humor, and trust in someone wholly unexpected. The human beside her had taught her that courage was not always measured by skill or authority, but by willingness to act when others hesitated. "You've taught me much," she said softly, eyes reflecting the twin suns' glow. "About courage, about unpredictability, about humans, I suppose." "And you've taught me something too," Dorian replied, tossing his hands in mock surrender. "Alien diplomacy is exhausting but oddly rewarding. Also, apparently touching a bone can earn you lifelong gratitude. Who knew?" Lysera's laughter spilled into the air, rich and unguarded, mingling with the hum of the city. "You are a most unusual human," she said, amusement and affection intertwining. "And yet I would follow you into chaos again." Dorian grinned, stepping closer. "Good, because I don't plan on slowing down. Adventure, mayhem, improbable survival, your company is required for scientific accuracy." Lysera shook her head, smiling softly, ears flicking in quiet approval. She realized the fear she had carried, the vulnerability, the helplessness, had transformed into trust, camaraderie, and even admiration. The human who had once been a monster in her eyes was now indispensable, a companion whose presence she both relied on and enjoyed. As they turned together, stepping away from the edge and back into the heart of the city, Lysera felt a quiet certainty. Her world had grown larger, her perspective broader, and her heart lighter. The chaos of the universe, once terrifying, was now something she could navigate, guided by skill, courage, and unexpectedly laughter. The sun dipped lower, casting long, crystalline shadows across the city. Side by side, alien and human, They walked forward into a future of unpredictable possibilities, bonded by trust, humor, and the shared knowledge that sometimes survival and connection came in the most unexpected forms. The journey had ended, but the story of them had only just begun.